Throughout the history of the NBA, there are many players that we can say changed the game of basketball itself. Sure, there are always a good amount of dominant players in the league, but a player that actually changed how the game is played is quite rare. But somehow, we were blessed to see this happen right before our eyes with one player, that player being Steph Curry of the Golden State Warriors. Today we have to tell a story of how an undersized kid flipped the world of basketball upside down and changed it forever, and when I say that, I mean it. The story of Steph starts back in March of 1988, where he was born in Akron, Ohio at the same hospital as LeBron James. During this time, Steph's father Del Curry was in his second year in the NBA and had yet to solidify himself as a legitimate player. But having a father in the NBA and a mother who was also quite the athlete gave Curry a sports environment from the start. By the age of 6, Curry was already exposed to basketball in a big way. Between all the NBA games he went to with his father, and the fact that he had a little brother Seth Curry to compete with, it was only a matter of time before Steph started to play the game himself. At age 6, Curry played in his first official game of basketball in a rec league, and at that moment, he found his purpose in life. As Curry said himself, quote, "That moment for me was when I knew that basketball would be my entire life." And that rec game, well, that was the start of something huge, not only for Curry, but the entire world of basketball. After that game, Curry continued to play and develop his love for basketball, constantly battling against his younger brother and getting wisdom from Del, who had solidified himself as a star guard in the NBA at this point in the eyes of many. Even though basketball was the center of Steph's life, it was also hard on him, being that he and the rest of his family moved from Charlotte to Milwaukee and then Toronto all in the year of 1999, because Del Curry was getting passed around from team to team. Despite these tough conditions for any kid, Curry continued to ball out, and by the time that he was entering high school at Charlotte Christian, he was a very solid player. But he was faced with a decision that still haunts him to this day. Upon entering high school, Curry had to decide what team he planned on trying out for. He could take the easy way and go for the JV team, or shoot for the stars and push himself to try out for the varsity team. Curry was fearful and nervous about trying out in general, so he took the easy way out and tried out for the JV team. Curry made the team, but was filled with burdensome regret because he knew he was good enough to play on varsity, but he just didn't have the courage at the moment, which ultimately led to him being stuck on JV for the time being. Despite Curry making the wrong choice in his mind, it still gave him a good lesson, to always be fearless in times where it matters, which to this day stuck with him and made him into the player we know today. Curry's decision didn't bother him for too long though, being that he was quickly pulled up to varsity for Charlotte Christian, where he averaged double figures scoring wise on solid efficiency. Despite the great start, Curry did struggle a bit, being that he was a 6 foot tall skinny guard that was, to put it simply, undersized. Curry had to learn how to make up for his lack of size, and I think we all know exactly what he started practicing to become what he is today: shooting. Being the son of an NBA player, Curry's game was already heavily influenced by Del, but the shooting is where things got taken to the next level. At one point early on in high school, Del Curry believed that Steph needed to change his jump shot for him to reach his full potential, and didn't even allow Steph to play in any games until he fixed his jumper. Steph described this as the summer of tears, because at that point in time, all his love for basketball was gone, and he couldn't play the game how he wanted. Now, even though this might not have been the best idea on Del's part, whatever he did worked, being that Curry improved his shooting splits a ton, averaging 48% from 3 in his senior year, and was able to lead the Charlotte Christian School to 3 conference titles and 3 state playoff appearances as well during these past few years. Being that Curry was one of the best shooters in high school, he was expected to get some pretty big offers. But not one major D1 school gave Curry a chance, likely because he was just at 6'2", 165 pounds, which just wasn't the guard the teams were looking for at the time. With a lack of offers, Steph decided to take his talents to Davidson State, a school that had been recruiting him heavily since his sophomore year in high school, despite his undersized build. This was one of the many times where loyalty played a big part in Steph's career, because he said that Davidson was very attractive because they truly wanted him to play for them from the start. Going into his freshman year of college, although Curry made almost half of his threes he took in his senior year of high school, he didn't have much buzz around the country, being that Davidson was somewhat of a smaller school. But even though there was a lack of hype for Curry, Davidson's head coach Bob Micklep had nothing but praise for Steph, and Steph himself said that before he played his first game, the coach praised Curry at a spring event, saying, "Wait until you see Steph Curry, he's something special." Now, would it have been more iconic if he said, "Look at Curry, man"? Sure, but all jokes aside, it was clear that Steph had someone that truly believed in him, which goes a long way for most players, and Curry was no exception to that. Despite the praise, Curry's start to his college career was, well, rough to say the least. In his first game with Davidson, Curry finished with a solid 15 points, but he also committed a staggering 13 turnovers, which had many people on the team concerned. But after this terrible first game, Curry never looked back, being that in his next outing, he dropped 32 points, 4 assists, and 9 rebounds in a win versus Michigan. After getting embarrassed in his first game, it was very apparent that Curry was on a mission to prove everyone wrong, and for the rest of the season, well, he did just that. No one truly knows why Curry turned the ball over so much in that first game. Some say he had a bad matchup size-wise, others believe it was just because of nerves. But regardless, this game caused Curry to work hard throughout the rest of the year, pushing himself more than ever before to become an even better shooter, ball handler, and to put it simply, better basketball player. After the countless late-night shooting drills, enduring practices, and adjusting his craft, Curry became an even better player than before, and led Davidson to a 29-5 record and was the highest scoring freshman in the NCAA aside from one player, that being Kevin Durant of Texas, who as many of you know will play a big role in Curry's career down the road. Curry ended his season averaging 21.5 points per game on very solid shooting splits, and broke the record for most three-pointers made by a freshman towards the end of the season when he notched his 113th three in the Southern Conference semifinals. Curry showed that he was one of the best shooters in the country, but at the time, many believed that that was his ceiling, a shooter that could get buckets when needed, but not really someone that could will a team to wins. And well, it's safe to say that these players were wrong, and it added yet another chip on Curry's shoulder heading into his sophomore season at Davidson. Heading into the new season, something happened to Curry that helped his game out even more, that being a growth spurt that took him to the height of 6'3" that he still is today. This wasn't a huge growth spurt by any means, but it did give Curry a very solid height for an NBA quality point guard despite still being very skinny. Entering his sophomore season in 2007, many expected that Curry would have a similar year to the previous season, or maybe even take a step back because he was so solid. But Steph Curry once again surprised everyone, improving in almost every aspect during this year. By the end of the regular season, Curry ranked up elite averages of 25.5 points per game on great shooting. Curry once again led his conference in scoring and led the Wildcats to a record of 26-6, which was slightly better than last year and got them into March Madness. With the Wildcats making the tournament for just the third time in the past decade, tension was high, and being that they were matched up against the 7-seed Gonzaga team, many expected Davidson to get past the first round at the very least. This was Curry's first true high-stakes game in his college career. All the eyes were on him to get this team their first win since 1969 in the March Madness tournament, and all the pressure was on his shoulders. The question is, did he deliver? Well, starting off this game, Gonzaga was blazing hot, and by the end of the first half, they were up by double figures. But after halftime, Steph Curry came to life and made a statement for everyone watching. Entering the second half, Gonzaga had all the momentum and an 11-point lead, but Curry checked in the game and hit a three ball, and then another, and then another. It was almost as though Curry couldn't miss a shot, and with the Wildcat crowd going crazy, it was clear that he used all the momentum to his advantage. Shot after shot went in for Curry, and the crowd roared. And by the end of the second half, Curry racked up 40 points shooting 8 for 10 from 3, and most importantly, getting Davidson their first March Madness win since 1969, almost 40 years ago from that exact day. Steph Curry did not play like a human in that game. He was literally lights out from 3, and what we saw from him was truly special. But just 2 days after his game, Curry and the Wildcats matched up against Georgetown, the second-seeded team with a ton of talent. The odds were not in favor of Davidson for this one, and right after tip-off, it was clear that this was just a better team. The intensity in the arena was high, and despite coming off a huge game just 2 days prior, Steph Curry was as cold as ice. Georgetown dominated throughout the first half, and by halftime, we're up by 17 points, and well, it looked like the game was over. At half, Curry only had 5 points, and looked like he couldn't make a shot to save his life, but after halftime, things took an interesting turn. It was almost as though Curry flipped his switch just like last game. First, he knocked down an easy bucket, and then before you know it, he got so hot that he could not miss. The Davidson crowd was ecstatic, and the energy was fueling Curry and the rest of the team to make a big comeback, which is exactly what they did. Shot after shot dropped in for Curry, and by the end of the game, he racked up 25 second-half points and willed the Wildcats to win over Georgetown with a final score of 74-70. At this point, people thought that Curry was superhuman. I mean, how do you go from ice cold to flaming hot in a matter of minutes? People had truly never seen anything like this in back-to-back games. Because of this big win, Curry and the Wildcats moved on to the Sweet 16, matching up against the third-seeded Wisconsin Badgers. This was yet another matchup where the opponent was heavily favored to win, but despite this, Curry came into the game hot, unlike his previous two, and torched the Badgers with a 33-point masterpiece and a final score of 73-56, a dominating Davidson win. At this point, all the momentum was with Davidson and Curry. They took down team after team that was supposed to be better than them, which put them in the Elite 8 against the 1-seeded Kansas Jayhawks, the best team in the NCAA at this point. The tension was high once again in this game because it was truly the hardest matchup that Curry had seen to this date. And despite coming out the gates firing and scoring 25 points, the Wildcats lost to Kansas with the final score of 57-59, an absolute heartbreaker that came down to the last moments of the game. Curry and the rest of the team were shocked. They truly thought they had what it took to win it all, and just like that, all their hopes of doing so were gone. But despite the far from desired ending, Curry was able to break the single season record for most three-pointers made in the final game, making his 159th three-ball. And after this loss, he was nominated for ESPN Breakthrough Player of the Year. The Jayhawks did go on to win the whole tournament, but for Curry, he had something much bigger to focus on: if he would declare for the NBA draft or continue his play and education at Davidson. This was one of the hardest choices in Steph Curry's life, because although he showed out in the tournament, he didn't think he was ready for the NBA because of his inconsistency. On the other hand, if he stayed in Davidson and got injured, his draft stock would plummet, and there's a chance he didn't even make the league. The choice loomed over Curry for weeks, and he was very thoughtful in his final decision, which was to return to Davidson for his junior year of college and try to further develop as a player. Curry once again worked hard over the offseason for the next year, trying to develop his craft and expand beyond the scoring ability that everyone knew him for. Curry knew that to be in the NBA, you had to be able to play make more, and being that he only averaged less than 3 assists in his previous 2 seasons, he had to change that for his draft stock. Not only that, but it was also crucial to keep the turnovers down because the NBA had some of the best defenders in the world. With these reasons in mind, Curry worked religiously, training his shots, passing, and ball handling, and in his junior year it truly showed. During his 2008-09 season, Curry looked even more elite than before, averaging 28.6 points, 5.6 assists, and 2.5 steals per game. Curry was able to develop his passing and shooting even more, and at one point during the season had a 7-game stretch of 25 points per game or more. It was very apparent that Curry had the skills of an NBA point guard, being that he nearly doubled his assist averages. All that was left to do is see what he can do in the March Madness tournament, or at least that's what people thought. Being that Davidson finished with a record of 27-8, many believe that they'd get in the tournament once again, but for some reason they weren't put in by the NCAA, and people are still questioning why to this day. Because of this, it almost seemed as though Curry didn't finish what he started, and he debated returning for his senior year because of this, but ended up declaring for the NBA draft. Going into the draft, Curry had finally gained some respect, despite being undersized in the eyes of many. I mean, after all, he proved everything he needed to with his time in Davidson. Heading into draft night, many believed that Curry would be a lottery pick, but being that he was from a smaller school, no one truly knew where he would end up. Emotions were high for Steph. It was finally time to show that a quote-unquote undersized guard can make the league, and with the 7th overall pick, Curry was drafted by the Golden State Warriors. At the time, Golden State was in an interesting spot as a team. They had some win-now talent like Monte Ellis, Jamal Crawford, Steven Jackson, and more, but they didn't have what they needed to be a winning team as a whole. Before drafting Curry, the team finished at the bottom of the Western Conference with a record of 29-53, and being that they were likely going to lose Jamal Crawford in free agency, they were looking to draft a guard, which is exactly what they did. Heading into the 2009-10 season, the Warriors knew that they were nowhere near winning, so right out the gate, they gave Curry a starting role just after 3 games on the bench, due to the flashes of potential they saw. The backcourt of Curry and Ellis was, well, interesting to say the least. Sometimes they seemed like a seamless fit, and other times that was far from the case. Despite this, Curry had a great rookie year once he hit his stride, averaging 17.5 points, 5.9 assists, and 1.9 steals in 36 minutes of play per game. Due to the heavy minutes, it was clear that the Warriors were trying to develop Curry, and it worked, being that he had the most 30-point games from a rookie besides Carmelo Anthony and LeBron James. The only knock on Curry at the time was the fact that he was inconsistent like we saw in Davidson, but other than that, he looked great. The Warriors as a whole, on the other hand, weren't looking too hot, being that they finished with a record of 26-56, near the bottom of the league once again. Things were looking bright for Curry though. The man was a runner-up for Rookie of the Year, but more importantly, set the record for the most 3-pointers made by a rookie with 166 made in 80 games, which is very good to say the least. During his rookie campaign, Curry still looked pretty skinny and undersized, but during the offseason it was clear that Steph gained some weight, which made him look a lot better, and it might have just helped his game too. Starting off the 2010-11 season, the Warriors were hoping that Curry would take yet another leap. Being that he looked solid in his rookie year, the expectations were that he'd become a centerpiece for the team and set them up for a bright future, or at least that was the hope at the time. This season, Curry improved slightly, averaging 18.6 points, 5.8 assists, and 1.4 steals per game. Now, this wasn't exactly the type of leap people were hoping for, but Curry did do a lot beyond the stat sheet that showed that he was getting better. It was very apparent that during the season, Curry was a much more consistent scorer on a nightly basis. He didn't have as many 30-point games, but he also didn't have as many low-scoring games as well. It was clear that he found his groove and became more consistent as the months went on. Not only that, but Curry perfected his free throw shooting and shot over 94% from the charity stripe, which was near perfection and enough to break the Warriors' record in just his 2nd year in the NBA. But despite these improvements, there was one daunting issue for Curry, that being his health. Up until this point in time, Steph had no issues with injuries in his career, but during this season is where his problems arose. Curry played 74 games, but towards the end of the season got an ankle injury that caused him to get surgery in the spring. This set Curry back in a huge way, and being that he had surgery, he wasn't allowed to train at all, which set his development back a lot. The injury bug followed Curry into his 2011-12 season, where he received multiple injuries on his right ankle and foot. During the games that he did play, Curry just didn't look the same. All his stats were down, and overall it seemed as though he was trying to be more careful because of his injury. With the 2011-12 season not showing much aside from injuries and the NBA lockout, this prompted the Warriors with an interesting situation. that being Steph Curry's new contract. There was a lot of debate going around at the time for whether or not the Warriors should extend Curry because of his injury history, but their organization saw something special in him, and because of this, extended him on a 4-year, $44 million deal. This was a huge contract for an injury liability at the time in Curry, and many people came out and said that this would be a huge mistake on the Warriors' part. But boy, were they wrong. After his second surgery, Steph Curry was able to start training again in preparation for the 2012-13 season, and worked on perfecting his shooting alongside his teammate Klay Thompson, that he had yet to play with a lot because of his injuries. Upon the start of the season, it was clear that Steph and Klay were something special, and got the name Splash Brothers because they were undeniably the best shooting duo in the league. Because Steph and Klay were so elite from outside, the Warriors created a new modern offense around it to get as many open looks as possible. No longer was it taking your time and finding a shot down low or in the post. It was constant ball movement and screens to take as many threes as possible. Up until this point, the game of basketball was pretty balanced. A lot of shots were taken inside the arc, and a three-point shooting was a minor way of scoring in the overall offense. With Steph and Klay, the Warriors flipped offensive strategy upside down and made something no one had ever seen. And well, as most of you know, it worked. Steph Curry went on to average 22 points, 7 assists, and 4 rebounds a game in 38 minutes of play. It was clear at this point in time it was the Splash Bros show, and Curry was almost in the top 5 scoring-wise in the league. But this team was just getting started. Curry went on to have a revenge tour against all the teams he played poorly against in previous seasons, dropping 54 points against the Knicks with 10 threes made and 47 points against the LA Lakers. Curry had officially put the league on notice and proved that he was a great regular season player, and he secured the Warriors' first playoff berth since he joined the team back in 2009 as the 6th seed with a record of 47-35. Now was the moment that Curry had been waiting for, the chance to prove everyone wrong and show that his new style of play as a quote undersized guard can lead to wins at the highest level. And being that the Warriors matched up against the Nuggets, many believed that Curry would show out and get the team the win, which is exactly what he did. Although coming out ice cold in Game 1, Curry was able to bounce back and lead the series in scoring and threes made, knocking out the Nuggets in a 4-2 series. The young Warriors had a lot of momentum and good things going for them, but the second round matchup against the Spurs was just too much for the young Warriors, and they lost the series 2-4, with Curry playing pretty inconsistently scoring-wise. Despite the second round exit, things were looking up for Steph and the Warriors. He had a ton of great young teammates like Klay, Harrison Barnes, and Draymond Green, who were starting to hit their stride. So going into the next season, many believed that Steph Curry and the Dubs would be even better, but I don't think anyone could have predicted what would proceed to happen. Going into the 2013-14 season, things were looking pretty much the same as the previous year. Steph and the rest of the Warriors got better, but the team as a whole didn't, which resulted in the team securing the 6th seed in the West once again. Curry did things similar to the previous season and continued to pave a way for the three-point oriented offense to be the best in the business. During this season, Steph was able to make 261 threes, which is already 4th most in NBA history. But despite the improvement to the team, they had less postseason success, losing to the Los Angeles Clippers in 7 games of the first round. After this series, there were many questions about the Warriors and the three-point heavy offense they were trying to implement. Was it worth all the effort to try and find the pieces to make this new offense work? Does Curry even have what it takes to be the #1 player on a contender? Will the Warriors ever escape mediocrity? Critics and analysts debated these topics all summer, but meanwhile, the Golden State Warriors were making changes that would set this team up to do the unthinkable and shock the entire NBA. After Curry and Klay proved they were the real deal in their second season together, the Warriors executives concluded that the issues from this team were because of the coach and fit of role players. Because of this, the Warriors went out and signed former NBA player Steve Kerr to be the new head coach of the team and tried to make the unique three-point offense work. Kerr immediately made changes to the way the Warriors play basketball and leaned into perimeter shooting as opposed to shying away from it as the previous head coach had. Kerr began forming an offensive scheme pushing Curry and Klay to play at a much faster pace and shoot the ball at will. To many, this seemed unorthodox to give players complete freedom to pull it from the logo if they want. But with this unorthodox adjustment, Steve Kerr unlocked what we know now as the best shooter of all time, and what happens next sounds like it's right out of a movie. To start the 2014-15 season, Steph and the rest of the Warriors were hot. It seemed as though the issues of inconsistency had seemingly melted away, and the young core of this team was finally blossoming into something no one thought was possible. Steph Curry was playing like a madman, getting 30-point games almost every single night, and these games weren't empty stats either, because, well, these games were leading to wins for the Warriors. By the All-Star break, Curry was #1 in votes with his extraordinary three-point centric offensive skill sets and was chosen to be in the three-point contest, All-Star game, and had a huge 51-point game just a few weeks before the All-Star weekend went down. It was clear that Curry and Klay were legit, both shooting almost double the number of threes compared to last year and when they entered the league. Yet they were making these shots at a higher rate. This new offensive playstyle was something that teams simply didn't have the pieces to combat against. And because of this, the Golden State Warriors were able to finish with a record of 67-15, above the second seed in the West by over 10 games. But more importantly, Steph Curry got his first MVP award, averaging 23.8 points, 7.7 assists, and 2 steals per game. The numbers don't even truly display Curry's dominance though, because throughout the season, he sat out in a total of 17 fourth quarters. After all, this team was winning so much they didn't need him on the court because they were that good. Going into the playoffs, it seemed as though it would take a superhuman athlete and team to stop Curry and the Warriors, and well, unfortunately for Curry, there was someone capable of doing just that on the other side of the playoff bracket. You guessed it, I'm talking about LeBron James. At the time, many believed that LeBron would be the only person to stop Curry, but heading into the playoffs, this was the last thing on the minds of Warriors players, because they had to show everyone they were a legit postseason team first. Coming off the 67-win regular season, this Warriors team was clicking on all levels, and had a ton of momentum heading into their first round matchup against the 8th seeded Pelicans. Because of this, Steph and the Warriors were able to steamroll through this team, beating them 4-0, and the same followed in the second round where the Warriors beat the Grizzlies in a similar fashion 4-2. By now, this Warriors team was the furthest they'd ever been in the playoffs under Steph Curry, and they were met with the Houston Rockets, which is where Curry showed that he is truly deserving of the MVP. During this series, Curry put on a masterclass, shooting the lights out from 3 and showing that he can be the man on a deep playoff team. Specifically, Curry was able to break the record for most 3-pointers made in a playoff run, and sent Houston home, beating them 4-1. It was clear that no one up until this point could stop Curry, but the man who people thought might be able to happened to make it to the finals. Hence, the Cavs-Warriors rivalry was finally born. This was the moment that Curry had been waiting for, the time to put all his hard work on display and show his new style of play leads to winning basketball. And there was no better way to prove this than beating LeBron James on the brightest stage. At first, it seemed as though LeBron and the Cavs might be too much for Curry and the Dubs, being that they struggled in the series in the first 2 games, and Curry was shooting horrendous splits from the field. But like we've seen time and time again, in Game 3, Steph heated up and didn't cool down until the Warriors were crowned NBA champions, beating the Cavs 4-2 and solidifying that they were legit. After this series, no matter where you looked in the basketball world, all you could see is Steph Curry. Steph Curry is the best player in the NBA, Steph Curry is changing the game before our eyes, any conversation that was revolving around basketball had Steph Curry's name involved. While all this was happening, many believed that the Warriors team would be celebrating like their job was finished, but they believe what they did was just the start, and well, they were right. Heading into the 2015-16 season, the Warriors had their core to win now, centered around Curry, Klay, Draymond, Iguodala, and a handful of elite role players that played a perfect part in their system. At this point, there wasn't much they could do to better the roster, so they instead focused on meshing even more as a team and becoming better as individuals as well. And they created a team that we might not ever see anything like ever again. The 2015-16 for the Warriors was iconic to say the least, and if one word could be used to describe it, I think anyone would say pure and utter dominance. The Warriors team looked like men among boys, and honestly, couldn't be stopped in the regular season, which led to them achieving the best record in the NBA history with a staggering 73 wins and only 9 losses. The Warriors came into the year hot once again, and Steph Curry alone put up 118 points in his first 3 games of the season, being the first ever player since Michael Jordan to achieve that feat. The Warriors were rolling, and even saying that is an understatement, being that they won their first 24 games of the season in pure dominance, before they lost their first of 9 games on the year. Curry at this point simply did not seem human. The man had 3 50-point games by February and was making 10+ threes a night just as often. The league simply didn't know how to guard Steph Curry and stop him from shooting the ball. Steve's Kerr system was being executed perfectly, and there was no way to counter it. Teams tried man-on-man, zone, and even a box-and-one scheme, and none of it worked. It looked like at this point, the Warriors could not be stopped on offense, and the only way teams would beat them is if they had an off night. Curry became an all-star once again, and lost in the 3-point contest to his teammate Klay Thompson, which goes to show just how much of an impact he had on the team as well. The Warriors went on to dominate the rest of the season without slowing down, and after achieving the best regular season record in NBA history, it seemed as though they were destined for a championship once again. I mean, Steph Curry became the first player to make 400 3-pointers in a single season, and Klay and Draymond were playing like stars as well, so no one could stop this team, right? Well, as the playoffs began, this looked to hold true, as the Warriors blew past the Rockets in the first round and the Trailblazers in the second round, beating both teams 4-1. Then, the true competition came for Curry, being that in the semifinals, the Warriors faced off against the OKC Thunder, led by Russell Westbrook, and the only other player who outscored Curry when he was in college, Kevin Durant. By this time, KD and Russ were one of the best duos in the league, and it seemed as though they were destined for a championship as well, and they played like this was the case, and took the Warriors to 7 games. Despite Curry coming off of an injury that he faced in the first round, he and the rest of the team were able to beat the Thunder in Game 7, which took them back to the finals, back against the Cavs team that was looking for revenge. Steph had already proved himself last year beating the King, but this was his big chance to show that he's the best player in the league, and build his resume for the all-time debate as well. Both teams were practically running it back. The Warriors had Steph, Klay, and Draymond, and the Cavs had Bron, Kyrie, and Love. This was the War of the Titans, and Curry knew that he had to be consistent to win this series, which is ultimately what led to the Warriors' collapse. In the first 4 games, this Warriors team looked great. They took a 3-1 lead and were looking like they were ready to finish off the Cavs with just one more game. Steph and Klay were terrific on offense, and Draymond was doing his thing as well. But honestly, after game 4, it seemed like things were a wrap. But LeBron James had other plans. In game 5, the Cavs clawed their way back to win and attempt to be the first team in NBA Finals history to come back from a 3-1 deficit. LeBron showed his greatness, and Kyrie Irving was playing out of his mind as well. The Cavs looked good, but there was no way they could win unless the Warriors suffered from inconsistency that they'd seen previously, which is exactly what happened. For the rest of the series, the Warriors looked like a different team, and Steph Curry was struggling since his return from injury, shooting 6 for 19 from the field in a Game 7 loss that made the Cavs champions. After this series, the tables turned completely. No longer was the attention on the Warriors, who made history in the regular season. All eyes were on LeBron James, who willed the Cavs team to a championship and made the biggest comeback in NBA history. After that, it was very apparent that the Warriors needed to make a big move. Sure, they were the best team in NBA history record-wise already, but if you don't win it all, you have to make upgrades. The summer of 2016 was an interesting one, because many stars were free agents, and the Warriors somehow had the cap space to bring in a max contract player. There were plenty of options, but Steph Curry himself wanted to try and recruit one player and one player only, that being Kevin Durant. Despite losing to the Warriors in the Western Conference semifinals, Kevin Durant showed that he is one of the best players in the NBA and was nearly unstoppable on the offensive end of the ball. It was clear that Russell Westbrook wasn't the best fit with Durant, so he decided if he couldn't beat the Warriors, he might as well join them, forming one of the best teams, if not the best team in NBA history to this date. With the huge acquisition of Durant, the Warriors had everything they needed to beat LeBron James, and honestly were set up for a dynasty for years to come. This roster had all the offensive firepower in the world, and defense to go with it too. Everyone knew that if healthy, we would see the Warriors and Cavs finals once again in 2017, and well, that's exactly what happened. The next 2 seasons for Curry and the Warriors were pure and utter domination. Curry, Klay, Durant, and Draymond all showed that they were among the best players in the league, and together were undeniably the best team that we'd seen in recent memory. Curry continued his elite production, averaging 25.3 points, 6.6 assists, and 1.8 steals despite playing alongside Kevin Durant, who also needed a lot of touches on the offensive end of the ball as well. Curry once again made the All-Star team in 2017, and the Warriors finished with an elite record of 67-15, slightly worse than their record before, but with adding a huge piece on their team, it was not surprising. Heading into the playoffs, everyone knew that it wasn't going to be close. The Warriors were just too good. So good that people even started to hate them because of it. Curry played at a beyond elite level, and KD was the cherry on top that allowed this team to beat LeBron and the Cavs 4-1 in the finals. This Warriors team made it look easy, and in 2018, just a year later, they made it look even easier, beating the Cavs 4-0. Nothing could stop Curry, Klay, and Durant. Literally nothing. This team was looking like they were ready to three-peat, led by Steph, who proved that he is by far the best point guard in the NBA. After their back-to-back championships with the addition of Kevin Durant, in the 2018-19 season, Curry got even better, averaging over 27 points per game with KD and everyone else on the team. The results for the Warriors continued to be the same. Another All-Star year for Curry, first seed in the regular season with a record of 57-25, and another championship run, this time against the Toronto Raptors. Heading into the series, Steph and the Warriors seemed as though they were in trouble. Injuries had plagued this once-dominant team, and players like Kevin Durant, DeMarcus Cousins, and more were sidelined because of grueling injuries in the previous rounds. Because of the Warriors being at half strength, the Raptors were able to take a huge Game 1 win at home, led by Pascal Siakam, who emerged as a star for the team. During this game, it was clear that the Warriors were injured, and by the end of Game 1, Andre Iguodala was limping and favoring his right leg. Game 2 was similar, except late in the game, Klay Thompson went down with an injury, and the only star left on the team was Curry. The Warriors were able to win Game 2 with the help of Klay before he went down with his injury, but Games 3 and 4 were both losses for the Warriors. At this point, heading into Game 5, almost the entire roster was battling injuries, but despite this, Klay and Kevin Durant played through it to try and go for the three-peat, which was ultimately the decision that collapsed the dynasty. In Game 5, Kevin Durant landed from a jump, and if you look closely, you can literally see his Achilles rupturing, which would take him out of the series and the game of basketball as a whole for 2 whole years. The Warriors were able to win the Game 5 to avoid elimination, making the series 2-3 against the Raptors, but that's not where the injuries for this team ended. In Game 6, the Warriors were hoping they could force a Game 7 with the splash rose, but in the second half, Klay Thompson had a funny landing and tore his ACL, and ultimately sealed the Warriors' fate of losing to the Raptors in 6 games. Steph Curry really did try his best to get this team a win, but half the team was hobbling and the Raptors were basically at full strength, so at the end of the day, there was really nothing he could do. The Warriors lost to the Raptors 4-2 in the NBA Finals, and Kawhi brought the chip to Toronto. Some people were happy that the super team finally lost at the time, but little did they know the Warriors dynasty would, well, never be the same. Klay Thompson was going to miss the entire season, and with KD leaving as a free agent, many believe we would finally see what Steph Curry could truly do by himself. Now is Curry's time to show what he is truly capable of, and show that he can carry a team like the all-time greats, but unfortunately, the injuries weren't done just yet for the Warriors. Shortly after the 2019-20 season began, Steph Curry fractured his hand on October 30th and was out until March. During this time, the Warriors struggled to win any games, and by the time the NBA bubble came around, the Dubs didn't even make it in because their record was so bad. During this time, Klay Thompson also suffered another monumental injury when training for his return, tearing his Achilles, and to this day, he still isn't back on the court yet. After the injury-riddled 2019-20 season, the Warriors were finally somewhat healthy and stacked up for the next season. The team was able to draft James Wiseman with the number 2 overall pick, and they got players like Andrew Wiggins to fit around Curry and provide defense. This was finally Curry's time to show what he could do, and well, it's safe to say he didn't disappoint. Individually, Curry had his best season in the NBA on the offensive end of the ball, averaging 32 points per game, which led the entire league in scoring. What was truly ridiculous is the fact that Curry shot almost 13 threes a game and made 42% of them, a truly mind-blowing feat that shows the evolution of how he changed the game for the better. Since he became a transcendent talent, the entire NBA shifted towards a three-point oriented offense, and it was all because of Curry and what he was able to do with the Warriors. To put this in perspective, in 2011, 22% of shots attempted in the NBA were three-pointers, a rather minor amount like mentioned in the beginning of Curry's journey. But now, in 2021, the percentage of shots that are threes in the NBA is nearly 40%, which is almost double of what it used to be. Steph Curry changed the game, plain and simple. With the help of Klay and Steve Kerr, Curry was able to unleash a new modern style of play centered around the three-point ball. And not only that, but he influenced the entire world with this play, encouraging kids to shoot the ball from outside. Curry showed that if you shoot for the stars, you can prove everyone wrong. And throughout his career, he's done just that, and inspired the next generation of basketball players to change the game for the better. It's difficult to say whether or not Curry will be able to form a new Warriors dynasty, but regardless, Curry already has a career and resume as a player that will go down as one of the best in history. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll catch you on the next one. Woods out.